A very good morning to you. Welcome to KTN MidMorning. My name is Koi. Now, in life, there are very few things that are certain other than death. But for women, there is another one, which is menopause. Now, menopause in our society faces such a stigma that we talk about it in very hushed tones. But the point is, every woman has to go through it, so why not get as much information as possible to help you with the transition? Dr. Jobo Bwaka is up next with information on menopause.
October 18th is the World Menopause Day. Menopause is a state in which menstruation ceases for a period of 12 months.
Menopause is the end or the end of having periods. Meno is just period, and pause is it has paused, and it's a natural event that occurs in every woman as you approach old age. Past the reproductive age bracket.
This natural process occurs gradually in most women after they hit the 45-year mark. The menstrual cycle becomes irregular for a period of time, and it can take several years before it completely diminishes. Some women are, however, known to experience artificial or early menopause due to a number of reasons, as explained.
The reason for early menopause is essentially that one is born with that tendency. There's a chromosomal tendency to early menopause. And if you study those families, you'd find that their sisters or their auntie went into early menopause. So that there's a familial tendency. But at the same time, there are also other organs that precipitate premature menopause. I have in mind, for example, the thyroid gland. If it diminished, it starts malfunctioning, then you may easily get into early menopause.
Premature ovarian failure, or a surgical procedure known as hysterectomy, which involves the removal of ovaries, can also cause early menopause. Poor lifestyle habits such as smoking, use of drugs and alcohol are also known to contribute to early menopause. Menopause presents itself through a number of symptoms. These symptoms range from irregular menstrual flow or lack of it altogether, heavier bleeding, and mood swings which are as a result of the hormonal imbalances.
The first thing that ladies will realize when they reach the ages of 45 is that you start having irregular periods. That's a sign that you are approaching that period. It's a perimenopausal period. And so that irregularity is a very fast sign that things are starting to wind up. The body is closing shop. And so at about 50, going to 55, then the periods will cease altogether. So the absence of period is an early sign. But then there are other things that we must know about, because there is one hormone that is produced by a developing egg. It's called estrogen. Now, the lack of estrogen is what actually leads to most of those symptoms that people know about menopause. One is that there'll be dryness of the reproductive tracts, a condition we call vaginitis or vulvovaginitis. And there'll also even be dryness of the urinary bladder, and they tend to have frequency of passing urine. They seem to have urgency to pass urine. All these are just symptoms that there's dryness in the urinary and reproductive tract. But at the same time, the commonest indicator of menopause is actually hot flashes. That a woman will suddenly find that she just sweats up very rapidly. She gets very uncomfortable. It's rather embarrassing at times. So those are the kind of things that you see early. And there are many other small problems that they develop over time. I may just mention two or three. One of them is as you enter real menopause, the bones become weak. The bone mass is reduced. So they tend to have fractures, backache, issues with their bones, with the limbs, particularly their legs, and so on. That is called osteoporosis, the diminishing of the bone mass that is seen in menopause. Definitely there are issues of emotional response to things. Mood changes are very common in menopause, and most people who are actually affected by that are usually the partners of women who have entered into menopause, because suddenly they become very moody, they react very awkwardly. All that is actually hormonally driven, and because the body depended largely on the estrogen and other female hormones. But as soon as that is out, you tend to get a problem. And whenever there is a change of hormones in a woman, there'll be mood changes. For example, in pregnancy, for example, during period time or just before periods, whenever there's that change, the body tends to behave differently.
Although a large number of the world's population go through menopause, the transition is not always easy for most women due to lack of information or lack of adequate psychological preparation.
I think menopause can be managed. That is what we need to remember. It can be managed. And the way to manage it first is a good understanding, a good counseling, so that as a woman develops, grows older, matures, she should be counseled and explained what she should be expecting. Most women go suddenly into menopause without understanding what is happening, and so they are thrown into confusion. I think so. Counseling and information, adequate information, is very important. Secondly, it's good for them to visit a doctor, so that they can also be investigated for other issues. They can be advised on nutrition, for example, calcium, taking calcium, and foods rich in vitamin D. Things like those are very important in order to forestall some of these issues like the osteoporosis I mentioned. So I think it's manageable. It's not the end of life. It's just a phase of life.
With adequate preparation, women should be able to enjoy this stage that marks the end of a woman's reproductive life.
Now, we've all had stories about the mother-in-law from hell, whose only goal seems to be tormenting those around her as much as possible. Now, whether you have one such in-law or you've heard of someone dealing with such an issue, here's some advice on Ties that Bind next.
I have a mother-in-law from hell. How do I deal with that? Mother-in-law. In fact, that's why there's even a program. Some stations do have a program on mother-in-law. This dilemma of mother-in-law is, I sometimes wonder whether it's a myth or reality. But I must say one thing, we must appreciate why a mother-in-law reacts that way. And in fact, the definition of hell is quite interesting, why we would describe a mother-in-law as hell. But we have to understand the context of why a mother becomes that way, even before we judge a mother-in-law. Now, our society today, because of the changes in the dynamics of the family, we have a lot of people today who are being raised up by single mothers. Some out of circumstances that are beyond them. A father who left or a father who passed on. And so it's a mother who heroically has managed to raise children, boys and especially. In this case, I'm talking about boys. But you do have others who choose to be single mothers out of, that's an elective choice. I'm not talking about those ones. But in any case, whichever case, single motherhood, when you raise a boy has very unique needs. And that's why there have been books that have been written about boys. It's one of my favorite by Dr. James Dobson about raising up boys. It's an excellent book because boys are a different world. So therefore, when a boy is raised up by a mother, a single mother, and this is what we're happening in most of our societies right now, what happens is that there's an attachment that grows. Remember, that boy eventually, as he grows up, becomes, in quotes, that husband that mother never had, that woman never had. A woman unconsciously, or at times consciously, starts placing roles of a male figure, a father figure, on this young man. So this is the context. So this young man then will eventually meet a lady. And all these years, 30 plus years, he's been the center of attention for this one woman who has put in everything on him, educated him, loved him. He's been the man in the home. Then all of a sudden you appear, and then you're supposed to be all of a sudden the only center of attention. And this is where the battles begin. And unfortunately, the lady who gets married starts looking at this man negatively, forgetting that you've got to appreciate where the man has come from. First and foremost, if he's mommy's boy, those are some of the things you should have looked at before getting into marriage. And remember that if you're marrying a mommy's boy, part of the package is that you will have to deal with his mother, because the mother is not going to let go overnight just because you're there. Remember, she is the one who's provided for him. She believes in her mind, whether it's true or implied, that we cannot judge. But she believes she's the only one who can take care of this young man. And therefore, here you are coming now to be the one to take care of him. Of course, there's going to be a conflict. But how do you deal with this so-called mother-in-law from hell? I would hate to use that mother-in-law from hell, because I say it always takes two for people to come from hell, because it's not just the mother-in-law, because we also have to attack the wife. Because many times the wife comes also with her guns loaded, ready to attack, with this perception that the mother-in-law is like this. Even before she's exhibited anything, so you're already looking for it. If you enter into marriage with that, you will find it. If you want to look for fault, you will get it. But the ladies I've seen who struggle, and it's not an easy thing, is that always entering marriage with a very positive attitude. And also to appreciate why she's like that. Don't look at her involvement, so-called, her excess involvement in your marriage and in your husband as a negative thing. Remember where he's come from and look at it positively. She's only looking out for the best of her son. And it takes time for her to truly eventually believe that you are capable of doing it, because she doesn't know you. So the thing I always say is that don't attack her, because by attacking her and branding her as mother-in-law from hell, first and foremost, it's already stuck in your mind. Whatever you tell in your mind is very powerful, because that is the way you will continue relating with her. And therefore, you break all bridges that are there to be able to reach out to her. She's a very important person. Let's look at the positiveness of our in-laws in marriage, because many times people always drum about the negative things that come with in-laws. A mother-in-law can be a very useful and very important ally in your marriage if you handle her well. And don't try and compete. You're already wonderful as you are. That's why her son chose you. Otherwise, why would he choose you? Because he knows you have something special, which the mother doesn't have. Remember that. So pride in yourself as having something unique. But again, having said that, I now talk to the men, because men are part of solving this problem in a big way. Your husband has to always champion your position. You now occupy a very important position now in marriage. And that's the vows you make. You become his number one priority. It's no longer mommy. The man, that has to enter his head. And once it enters his head, he has to be the one to communicate it to his mother. Remind his mother, Mom, I appreciate very much your attention. Thank you very much. But now, Wamboi, Joki is now my wife. And I need you to also respect her as my wife. Don't be the one to tell that to your so-called mother-in-law from hell. Let the son be the one to explain it to the mother. He has to protect you from the in-laws. And this is where people make mistakes in dealing with in-laws. You don't deal with his in-laws, and then vice versa. Whenever it is an in-law issue, let the person who's from that family be the one in the marriage who deals with the in-laws. And always speak as one voice. Be united when you're speaking to your in-laws. Because human beings by nature look for a crack. So if they see you're divided in any way, you don't speak as one voice, they will thrive. They will enter inside and make their way through. But when they see you speak as one voice, they know here is a no-go zone. There is a man in the house and he's truly entrenched this wife as his number one priority. But that takes time. Let's not forget. This is a relationship that has been built over years. Here you are starting a marriage. Be patient. It doesn't happen overnight.
The thought that menopause is the beginning of the end is an absolutely misguided notion. Think about it the bright side. You are free from the fear of unwanted pregnancy and the hassles of your monthly period. Make sure you drop us a line on our Facebook page. It's KTN MidMorning, or you can always send an email midmorning@standardmedia.co.ke. That's all we have for you today. Enjoy the rest of your day.